What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Jacked Ramsays. Danny Meringue here on a Wednesday night. Not impromptu, but obviously the news of the day is what we'll be diving into. Was looking like it was going to be the quiet part of the NBA offseason for the Portland Trailblazers, as everyone is kind of buckling down, at least for a couple weeks. It got busy this morning. First of all, like, rate, review, subscribe, do all of the things here. Help us continue to grow the channel. I was planning on doing a show sometime this week, probably later this week, and it had nothing to do with this. So, did not know that it was going to be this close. There was certainly some noise around momentum gathering. I believe that the auction process was going to take place in about a month or so. Wasn't right. So, let's get into it. Reporting originally on the deal, Sportico reports that the Portland Trailblazers and the Paul Allen estate have indeed agreed and reached a tentative agreement, to sell the Portland Trailblazers to a group that includes Tom Dundon, the current not only majority shareholder, but 100% owner of the Carolina Hurricanes of the NHL. Others in the group include Blue Owl Capital co-president Mark Czar and Portland-based Sheil Tile, co-CEO of Collective Global, for a deal that has a valuation over $4 billion. The updated article has it listed at roughly $4.25 billion. The deal includes two payments, one at close and one at a later date, with a blended valuation of roughly 4.25. So that's let's do the math on that. 4.25 billion is 4,250 million. Wah, 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 wah. It's a lot. I have maintained for a long time now that the Blazers were going to sell for $4 billion, which is one of the many reasons why Phil Knight's $2.2 billion offer was anywhere close to what was needed for the eventual sale of the team. And I bet you Glenn Taylor, of the formerly of the Minnesota Timberwolves, is just kicking himself having sold the Minnesota Timberwolves for $1.5 billion. Oops. So, what does it all mean? What does this look like? Where does this go from here? There's a lot of open-ended questions. First of all, if you want to catch basically 3 hours of this discussion, Harris and I on the firm of Harris and Meringue dove into it today. You can catch the podcast 105.1, firm of Harris and Meringue. Go catch the podcast there, and you can find those. We went in, out, over. I'll do a lot of the same stuff that we talked about there, but also probably dive into a little bit more of my thoughts after having made more than a few phone calls and a lot of text messages. So, team is sold, or at least agreed to be sold. Of course, my camera's going to act weird right now for some ungodly reason. Sorry, I'm all blurry. It's little beer goggles on me. It makes me look better. Whatever. If you're watching along on YouTube, if you're just listening, you're probably like, what is he talking about? Anyways. First of all, let's dive into who Tom Dundon is. As I mentioned, he's the 100% stakeholder of the Carolina Hurricanes. He originally purchased the Carolina Hurricanes in 2018 for, I believe it was 52 or 54%. Sorry, I've seen a lot of numbers today, and I'm getting them all mixed up in my head. And in June of 2021, he bought out the remaining shareholders of the Hurricanes to get 100% ownership of the Carolina Hurricanes. The other two names mentioned here, and this is important when you kind of read this kind of thing. This is a kind of a media literacy test. First name is going to be the big name, right? That's either the person that's putting up the most capital, the person with the most pull, the person that will be front and center. It can be a lot of different things. Remember the Lakers being sold, or I should say, the remaining stake of the Lakers being sold earlier this summer. Mark Walter and the Guggenheim Group. Walter is a guy who is not forward facing. He's obviously part owner of the Dodgers. I think his net worth is estimated somewhere between $10 and $12 billion. Guggenheim Group is infinitely more than that. But there's like a pecking order to this, right? And if you look at the net worth or what's publicly available on these individuals, you find that Dundon is worth anywhere between $1.2 and $1.7 billion. Sure, I'd like to have that money. But this isn't Steve Ballmer. This isn't Jeff Bezos. This isn't Larry Ellison. This isn't Huang down at NVIDIA. These aren't the 50, 40 plus billionaire, more money than God people. Also in this list, Portland-based Shield Tile, who's the co-CEO of Collective Global. I've had some intermittent discussions about his net worth and kind of where he falls into that. He's not as immediately available, and the numbers on him aren't quite there, which leads me to believe he's probably worth, hundreds of millions of dollars. But if you want to see some or read some interesting things about Shield Tile, his company CEO Global Capital or Capital Global or Collective. Good God, I have too many freaking names in my head right now. Make sure I get that right. Collective Global, not Capital. It's okay, guys. Very interesting person. Graduated Stanford at 19 years old. Has a JD from, I believe, Harvard, if I remember correctly. Very successful at a very young age. Forbes 30 under 30 in 2013. Very successful at a young age. I mean, graduating Stanford at 19, that's a person that's highly motivated, highly organized, and very intelligent. It's the kind of person you probably want in ownership in one facet or another. But you put these three people together, and their collective worth is not, $4.25 billion. So it leads me to believe there's probably some money somewhere else. Or they're liquidating something else to try to move something else here or there. And then figure things out from there. One of the first points that was made in the article was that the desire to keep the team in Portland is part of what they wanted to do. And that's highlighted in here. They actually do have a quote from Dundon. Sportico does. It's just, we are excited. So it's recognizing that the bid has been accepted and the process can now begin of getting the league governors, owners, to sign off on it. And when that'll come and how that'll come, that's up for debate. Interestingly enough, the league approved officially today the sale of the Boston Celtics. So that timeline is finalized. Obviously, the Timberwolves timeline was drug out through arbitration in the court. And we don't have yet final say on the Lakers sale. So I would imagine by the end of this season, we probably, if we don't have resolution, we are definitely heading towards it by summertime at least. Could go quicker. Could take longer. I'm just kind of going off the average here. I would imagine somewhere between 6 and 8 months. The at least news coming out originally, again, is that the team is going to stay in Portland. I think when you've seen Mayor Wilson in Portland, Governor Kotek of Oregon, and the collective group effort, as it were, of various trailblazers, business people, movers and shakers in politics, whether that be Ron Wyden or Chris Dudley, Clyde Drexler. There was multiple business folks also in that world. I would imagine there was probably a play to try to get in on some development or some land or further capital gains. We'll just say it that way. But this is the first step in a long process. It's not done. It's just getting started. So it has to go through all the approvals and signed off and approved by the league and their governors, board of governors, as it were. I don't immediately see any reason why it wouldn't. The most recent sale in Portland that fell apart, unfortunately, with the WNBA and was it Keith Brown, was because of monetary financial issues. When he originally was selected to purchase the team, his stock price with his holdings and his net worth was substantially higher than it was when they got down to brass tacks. And ultimately, the financial element proved to be an impediment, and that fell apart until the Bethal family came in and they were able to resurrect that process and establish that team. But those are the kind of things that can happen. We obviously saw, God, was that a decade ago now, with the Sacramento Kings, and what will they, won't they move, and them maybe moving to Seattle and everything that was coming out of that, and how contentious that got. We don't know where this stuff is at, right? So while there is, again, the language matters, they've reached a tentative agreement to buy the Portland Trailblazers. When it goes official, and that stuff is, the pen is on paper and dotted line and money's exchanged, then we can say, okay, now we can push forward. With that in mind, Tom Dundon is going to be the face of this as it appears right now. What has he done with the Carolina Hurricanes? Well, since he purchased them in 2018, they have not missed the playoffs. They have not finished under a winning percentage of 59%. They've been very successful. The Raleigh market, I close one of these tabs. Pull this back up. There we go. If you want to pull up the market data, as it were, depending on which one you look at, the size of Portland is anywhere between the 19th and 22nd, or this one has it as 24th, as far as market size. Let me pull up the list that I had earlier. There we go. Here we go. 22nd. 22nd is where I've seen them most often. Raleigh-Durham's 27th. They're roughly the same size. So this is somebody who not only has an affinity for red, white, and black circles, as everyone has made that joke between the Hurricanes and the Blazers. He has an affinity for coastal teams that are in markets that are roughly anywhere between 2.5 and 3 million total population market size when you talk about outer lying or suburban areas in those cities, in those metroplexes. And he's been successful in Carolina. They have 2 conference finals runs, which have been gut-wrenchingly awful in the way they fell apart. But he's been successful. And he's done it in a manner that is workable in small markets, if I'm looking for the positive things. They, last year, despite being a very successful franchise, had the 23rd highest payroll in the NHL. That's working on the margins, working with less. This is not somebody who's worth $40 billion that can just write checks. Has money, certainly, but working in a smaller market without the necessary finances to just tell everybody to go to hell. I mean, in everyday world he does, but not in the sports world. And being successful and being shrewd in what he's gotten done. I've reached out to people in the market, people who've covered the team, people who have been around the team, and I've gotten mixed reviews. Fan base loves him for the most part because they're competitive, and if you're not familiar with the Carolina Hurricanes, one of the best fan bases in the sport. They're absolute lunatics. They're called Caniacs for a reason. They are psychotic in the best possible way when you're talking about fandom. I think there's a lot of similarities there with the Blazers fan base, which is probably part of the allure. Also, there's not many of these franchises that come up for sale, and when they do, if you're Boston, you're $6 billion. If you're the Lakers, you're $10 billion. The valuations matter, right? Who can get in on a $4 billion team versus a $6 or $10 billion team? That list gets infinitely smaller as you work your way up that list. The Athletic had an article that had feedback from agents in the NHL, anonymous agents, calling the Carolina Carolina Hurricanes, the second most difficult franchise in hockey to deal with. He was also voted the worst owner. Again, you have to consider the source and agents, but I wonder how that will translate to the NBA. It's one thing to do a 10-year, $70 million deal in the NHL. It's another thing to do a 5-year, $70 million a year deal in the NBA. And the movers and shakers and players in the NBA and then you get to the NFL and Major League Baseball, they have a lot more power. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. I've also heard that I use the word meddling, and it has a negative connotation, so I shouldn't necessarily use that. I've been told from multiple sources that he is somebody that has his hands on everything in the organization, that he puts a stamp on everything, that nothing gets done without his approval, and that's not uncommon in the sense of the buck stops here, but I was not given the thought that he was someone who empowered those underneath him in the power structure. That he wanted to be the owner, the GM, the AGM, the coach, which I personally, I want somebody who cares. I don't want somebody who's an investment tycoon who just comes in and runs this like a business and is looking to just turn a profit. The flip side of that is those that get that deep into it can start to get a little too high on their own supply. That's my hesitation with that. But I'd rather have a woe horse than a giddy horse. And by that I mean I'd rather have to pull the reins back on somebody than try to get them motivated. So it's hard to find the perfect owner. In fact, the perfect owner probably doesn't exist. You know, people point out, well, the NFL and the Kansas City Chiefs, it's like, the Hunt family is notoriously cheap. Had horrible locker rooms, their family services, like the player poll just basically eviscerated them. The money doesn't always solve everything. The give a damn factor doesn't always solve everything. You know, ask a Pittsburgh Steelers fan how they feel about the Steelers in their quest to win 9 games every year. It all depends on what you want, right? The other question I have is if he is somebody who is very management focused to the point of micromanaging things. The NHL and NBA seasons happen at the same time. And I wonder who comes first? Are others empowered? What does that process look like? Who do they hire? Who do they fire? Who do they keep? Is this somebody that comes in and tries to make a splash like Matt Ishbia? And how horrible that went. Is this, or in his own state right now in Carolina, I shouldn't say his own state, where his team is at because he's in Dallas. David Tepper bought the Carolina Panthers and managed to crash that into the ground in horrific fashion. He's probably one of the worst owners in the NFL. The only saving grace is that I think he's worth $20 billion. Otherwise, he would be lumped in, and probably should be lumped in, with the Brown family and Haslam family, with the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals, just being a tire fire. So those are all questions. Those are the things that I wonder and then I consider as far as like, okay, cool, let's check this box. The team is sold, or at least a tentative agreement is to be sold. Okay, we're starting that process. Good. You have an owner who gives a damn, or at least whoever the likely governor / majority stakeholder that gives a damn. You have one of the other people listed in Shiltile who is Portland-based. His wife works for Oregon Health Authority, which I don't think that's something that was by accident. I think they were looking for somebody with ties, not only to the city, but the community, but I would imagine that would probably help move things along, as it were, as it pertains to land use, particularly around the current site of Moda Center. And that's where a lot of this is going to end up settling, right? Is Adam Silver did not go out there and say that the sale of the Portland Trailblazers and the preference to keep the team there or here or whatever you want to call it, just willy-nilly. I think that was the first flare being sent up of here comes the process. And that process is what happens with Moda. Does it get gutted and redone? Do they tear down Lloyd Center and build there? Do they tear down Veterans Memorial Coliseum and somehow manage to buy the grain silo and the surrounding property and turn that into a district and then play in Moda while the other place is torn down? Again, these are all a million questions. But I think the group that they brought in was very specific. And with Dundon, they have the Lenovo Center that the Hurricanes play at right now. Just doing some research on that process. Carolina Hurricanes are on the hook for $800 million over the course of 20 years to be invested into that district and the arena and everything in the surrounding areas, where the taxpayers are on the hook for, if I remember correctly, it was $300 million. So you're looking at a valuation for that district, the building up of all of that, of approximately $1.1 billion, which I would imagine in Portland it would probably be somewhere between 1 and 1.2, 1.4. And if that's the case, how much is the city of Portland, the state of Oregon, willing to put up to get this done? Because ultimately that's what this is going to come down to. I know the region pretty well, I think. And my thought process immediately, I should say probably 5-6 years ago, was that there will never be a penny that will go towards this. I have evolved my thought process on that to where I could see anywhere between 10 to 15%. I think the max that this region will be comfortable doing, and even then it wouldn't be comfortable, political leaders would have to expend quite a bit of political capital. I strongly believe that, in upwards of 20%. So if you have a $1 billion investment, let's just use a round number here, that would put the region on the hook for $200 million. Okay. And everybody's quick to point out the jock tax increase from $150 million to $800 million. That's just the allotment to the pool of what can go into it. It doesn't mean that there's $800 million in it right now. So that's not. It's more of a simple analogy is kind of an IOU, and that money getting diverted from somewhere else. So, okay, how does that work? And what do they do? Do they renovate Moda? Do they build a new building? Do they relocate the building or relocate the team? I shouldn't use relocate the team. Do they move them within Portland? Because I know relocate, all of a sudden, people freak out. But as much as this feels like, hey, great, this process is done, it's just getting started. And where this goes from here, the next part of this is, what is Moda's future? What is the Rose Quarters future? What do they want to do? What do they require? What is the city/state willing to work within? Every part of this, you have to kind of wonder, where does this kind of come from? That's to me the next biggest part of this. It doesn't matter who's buying. Well, I guess it does matter who's buying the team, because if somebody like Bezos bought the team, I think the city/region would tell him to pound rocks and go build it yourself, because you're worth $150 billion or whatever his worth is right now, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with this. You have an owner that is coming in, at least the face of the ownership group, that has experience, and positive experience, with Carolina Hurricanes in Dundon. You've got somebody with regional ties in Shield Tile, who, again, is the co-CEO of Collective Global. Tile's net worth is not popping up from any discussions that I've had, which leads me to believe he's probably $500 million or less. Again, oh my God, broke guy, right? Mark Czar was listed at about $1 billion, and Dundon was listed anywhere between 1.2 and 1.7. So I think that probably means there's other minority investors that are going to be involved. And whether or not that's that same group that kind of popped up out of nowhere, I wouldn't be surprised. Because this becomes kind of a real estate venture at that point. Because if they build the district and they do the thing that I agree with, to be blunt, there's no reason to go to Moda other than for the event itself. I'm there 41 times a year, have been for a long time. I would love it if there were restaurants there. I would love it if there were stores there. I would love it if it was a cool place to hang out. You know, I grew up out here. I went to high school out here. There used to be destination spots in Portland. And now it's these little destination pockets. And I think it would rejuvenate the city of Portland. I think it would do a lot for their image. I think it would do a lot for, this sounds corny, some civic pride. There's just a lot there that I think it needs to happen one way or the other. Whether it's at Lloyd Center, whether it's at Red Tail, whether it's at the current location and they just completely razz it and start from scratch. Whatever that process ends up being. Honestly, I think the location there right now, I'd rather see them develop that area. If I had my bones about it, I'd tear Memorial Coliseum down. Again, this is me operating with no budget. Tear Memorial Coliseum down, buy the grain mill, get the buildings across the street, get that whole bleeping area, and work from there. Because you could do a million things with it. That's what I would do. If I had all the money in the world, if I won the lottery and it was a $10 billion lottery, that's the way I'd go about it. Right? Take the $5 billion lump sum and go ahead and figure it out. So, I wish this was like, oh, hey, this is where they're at. This is where they're done. We can wrap this, we can put a bow on this. But honestly, they're just getting started. And Joey says, Danny, not making me feel good about this. I don't want to make you feel good or bad about this. To be honest, I don't. Because I use this analogy on the radio today. I watched every single minute of Jan Hansen footage I could get my eyes on before going down to Summer League after they drafted him. And I wrote 7,000 words and trimmed it down to a whopping 5,000. Big trim job that I did there. But I sat down at the desk on the baseline for game one and I had a couple scouts in the league that I know that pulled up next to me. And they're like, what do you expect? And I was like, man, to be honest, I'm going in with no expectations. I have thoughts, but I want to see what it looks like. And maybe that's just me getting older and not wanting to jump to this conclusion or that conclusion or whatever it is. Again, the things that I shared from discussions that I've had with people, there's some good, there's some bad, and I think there's some things in there that are good that some people think are bad, and I think there's some things in there that I was like a little worrisome about that I think some people think are great. But I need to see this in practice. I need to see what this looks like. I need to see how much money's involved, what the plan is, what the process is, what the ultimate goal is when it's all said and done, and then we can figure it out. I wish this exchange was as simple as buy team, move on, much like the Celtics and Lakers, right? You buy team, all right, we're good, keep it going. Don't have to mess with anything. No, this is not that situation. Moda Center, if I remember correctly, is the 7th oldest building, active building in the league. And once you toss out like the MSGs of the world, which are very old, it is the oldest building in the league that hasn't undergone major renovations. So even though the Bulls Arena is older, the Jazz Arena is older, obviously MSG is older. There's a couple others I can't remember in there. I think Amway Center in Orlando is older. I think it's still Amway Center. All of those arenas have undergone massive, massive, massive renovations. Moda's had like little things here or there. And Moda's not a hellhole. It's not. It's just nowhere near any of the other arenas. Like I've been up to Climate Pledge, 4 times in the last couple of years. While the undercroft of that place feels like it was built in like 1966, everything else about it feels amazing. It is the sight lines, the design, just the way it feels, the amenities, The way the concourse is set up, the surrounding district, everything about it kicks ass. It's awesome. Absolutely awesome. Moda's missing basically all of that. Like, you go into a locker room for another team, like the Blazers locker room is fine, but it's very simple. And that doesn't matter to the collective us. But it's one of those things that definitely stands out when you go into an arena and you're like, I got to peek my head in at Climate Pledge for the Kraken. I was like, damn. Made Moda Center locker room look pretty underwhelming in comparison. So, there's that needs to be done. The just very vanilla circular concourse that doesn't have a ton of space and doesn't allow much room for shops or restaurants or bars or food selection or anything like that. It's mostly just kind of, it's from a bygone era. Now, that arena when it opened in 96 was first in class, but that's next year. That's 30 years ago. And to use my my golf analogy, the clubs I've been playing with are 11 years old. I went to go get fitted Sunday, and the clubs I was swinging, like everything I did went infinitely further, felt better, looked better. Everything about it was just better, and I was like, oh, okay, technology, it's improved a lot in a decade. So I think a lot of this is true about arenas. And it's not about making arenas bigger. It's about making them better. In fact, most arenas, whether it's in football, baseball, basketball, are getting smaller. It's about everything else around it. Whether it's in baseball, down in Atlanta, like the entire district they set up there, like 25 minutes away from Atlanta. Whether it's been the Milwaukee Bucks or the Toronto Raptors, they've got like the Jurassic Park, and I can't remember the one the Bucks have. The Deer District, I think that's what it is. But like just having a place where you can collectively come together. And I think that's just been something that's missing. It's not even just for Blazers games. It's for the Fire. It's for if they get an MLB team. If it's for concerts. It's whatever event. There's no reason to go down there except for the event itself. And then you don't get there early because there's nothing to do. You don't stay after because there's nothing to do. So, yeah. I think that's I think the sale part of this is probably, it's not the easiest, but once that hurdle is crossed, that's probably the simplest part of all of this. And it's not simple. There's a lot of vetting and stuff that takes place that, before that all transpires and changes hands. I think the biggest hurdle isn't the team and what he does or what they do with the roster or who they keep and who they don't and who they trade and who they sign. That'll all take care of itself. That's business as usual in whatever sport you're running. But the arena / districts / region, all of those things, those are the biggest questions right now. So we're just getting started there. So I wanted to keep this one shorter just because, one, I wanted to talk about it, get my original thoughts out there. Beyond that, just start the process of like, okay, now what? Because there's, as much as this feels like we're moving into a new era and Jody and the Vulcans and Bert are selling in the Paul Allen estate, the Paul Allen era, it's not officially over, but they've reached a tentative agreement to end it, as it were. And we'll do some reflection when that happens. When that officially goes through, we can go through what the Allen family era was. But this is the beginning of what the next era will look like. We are looking at the third family to own this franchise. It hasn't changed hands a lot from the original ownership group and what Mr. Glickman did and before selling it off to Paul Allen. And then after Paul Allen passed, Jody and Bert and the trust taking hold of the team in 2017, 18? God, it all blends together. To where we are now. And once it transpires and that, again, it changes hands, we'll begin the third era. And that's where we are here. So I wish I had more, but this one was kind of sprung on the world, as it were, pretty quickly. This is the first step of many. And when I've got some more information, when I talk to some more people, I'll probably write about it, talk about it on the radio, come back and do a podcast. I am efforting to get some guests to either hear or for the radio, depending on how that all shakes out, to kind of go through this. I'm trying to get one for the radio tomorrow. Hopefully I will know back here in the next hour or so. And if I do, I'll go ahead and plug that on Twitter, and we can dive into that and kind of see where stuff goes as far as it relates to Tom Dundon and experiences in Carolina. But this is all just here. Process isn't done. It's just getting started. So with that said, like, rate, review, subscribe, do all of the things. Share us with your friends, share it with your family. I appreciate you all. Make sure you're tuning into 105.1 all day long, starting at 6 in the morning with Dirt and Sprague until 10 when the firm of Harris Meringue takes over, 10 to 1. Ducks Insider 1 to 2. Happy Hour with Luke Anderson 2 to 3. And then Primetime with Isaac Suk 3 to 7. Look at that. Company man at 105.1, the fan. As I get more information, as I get more guests, as I get more understanding of this stuff, I'll share what I can. But I would imagine within the next 6 to 8 months, we have a much better understanding of where things are, where they're headed, and where ultimately the franchise is going, both as a basketball team, a business, and as an institution in Portland. And that's ultimately the goal, right? Team no leave, of which I have no reason to suspect that this team is moving anywhere, especially after bringing in, as part of the ownership group, somebody local with real ties. Because if they did, that family would have to relocate and never come back. So I don't think that you do that unless you were really dirty and underhanded. And it wouldn't be the first time, but can't come home. So other than that, everybody, thank you all for being here. I appreciate you. I know this is a little bit of a different pod than we usually do, but I wanted to make sure I got on here, went through a few things. Share it with your friends, share it with your family across the social media at Danny Meringue, at D Meringue on Twitter. And weirdly enough, I'm on TikTok trying to do some stuff there, but don't count on it. Other than that, everybody take care. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. Talk soon, and I'll catch you on the radio tomorrow, 105.1 The Fan, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., the firm of Harris Meringue. Have a wonderful night. Talk soon. Bye.